Happy Friday, friends. So today's in day at LinkedIn. So for those of you that are not familiar, here at LinkedIn on the third Friday of every month, we get to focus on ourselves. We get a whole day, focus on our community, focus on the global community. And so I thought it made sense for us to talk a little bit about employee resources groups. For those that are still serving and you're not sure what an employee resource group is, I like to kind of think of it like an after-school club of sorts, but it's where certain members get together that have an affinity. So here at LinkedIn, obviously, I'm the co-leader of the Veterans Employee Resource Group here in New York, but we also have OLA, which is for those that have an affinity for the Hispanic community. We have Black Inclusion Group, we have the Women's Group, and so there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. So if you're at LinkedIn, you're watching and you want to join the veterans group, obviously you know who to contact. But from the candidate perspective, the employee resources group also offer a lot of support. And I want to talk about how if you're at a company and you're trying to grow your employee resources group in the veteran space, how you can do that. And then also if you're a candidate, there are some ways that you potentially might be able to leverage the group. So I'm gonna give some examples. When I started at Facebook, I was working with my recruiter, Doris, who I have a good place in my heart for, Doris, still. And I had an offer between Facebook and another large tech company I couldn't decide. And so Doris said, hey, would you like me to introduce you to someone in the veterans group that might be able to talk to you offline and answer any questions that either you don't feel comfortable asking me, or maybe they can offer you some insight from a more personal perspective. And so she introduced me to a wonderful woman named Rayanne, who did exactly that, kind of talked me through any insecurities I was having. And so takeaway number one, which is if you're working with a recruiter, it might behoove you to ask them if they could introduce you to someone in the veterans group that could just be another point of contact. So I met Rayanne, who was amazing and wonderful. Again, warm place in my heart for Rayanne. And when I decided to come to Facebook, I don't know if it was informal or formally, but Rayanne reached out to other members of the veterans group. So that whole first week that I was at the company, I ended up having lunch, I think almost every day with someone different from the veterans group. So I can still remember, it really did have a big impact. I can still remember exactly where I sat. So Andrew and Bill, if you're listening, thank you for taking time all those years ago to sit with me. And the reason that it was important was not just because it extended my onboarding experience and really made it seem like a warm introduction, but I ended up meeting people in different lines of the business that could also answer, day-to-day questions and the ecosystem of the business unit. So I think that's one of the great reasons that having an affinity, especially in the veterans group, you might understand beyond just the small set that you're working in. So again, second way is if you're growing your employee resource group, maybe partner and see if when candidates are joining the company, if you can join them for a meal that first week. The third way was at one point, the recruiters at Facebook had some members of the different groups come into a room and we did a blitz, meaning we just went through our networks and we surfaced, the top 20 people in our network that maybe the recruiters could do some cold outreach to. So within an hour's time, they were getting hundreds and thousands of diverse leads. So that's another way that you want to connect maybe with someone in the employee resource group that they could give you a referral if you're a candidate, or you could obviously, if you partner with HR, you could maybe source hundreds of leads from diverse communities that they could then use later on. Then the fourth way was, even though I wasn't in the recruiting space and I was a hiring manager, I sometimes was able to join the recruiters at some of the military career fairs. So I'm a West Point grad, be Navy, and I was able to go to the Service Academy career fair and help them man the booth and almost act kind of as like an interpreter of sorts. And I also went through a lot of resumes and pulled out ones that had, pretty stellar military careers so that they could, just take one more look at those. So I guess to wrap up, in talking about employee resources group, some of the ways we talked about today was, if you're a recruiter, think about leveraging those groups to be ambassadors of sorts. And if you're a candidate, maybe ask your recruiter if there's someone that they could recommend that you speak to that's in the same group as you. The second would be, if you are an employee resources group, try to create and involve yourself in the onboarding experiences, whether that's lunch or some other type of introduction. And if you are a veteran and you're starting at a new company, maybe ask the recruiter if they could sync you up with the ERG even before you get started, so that way you could have that warm onboarding experience. The third would be, if you're an employee resources group, maybe joining forces with some of the others at the company and working together to source, if HR is willing and recruiting is willing, to source a lot of leads from your communities, because referrals are the number one source of hire for almost every company. And then the fourth would be, if your schedule allows and your leadership allows, to ask if you can join recruiting or HR at any of the career fairs where there's going to be diverse populations. So like I said, the Service Academy Career Fair, maybe you could join with that. All right, happy Friday, friends, and I'll see you next week. Thanks for all the questions. Bye.